We are at the home of Dennis Plews. Dennis, what is your address?
6752 Stillwater Way, Sarasota, Florida.
Okay, and Dennis, when is your birthday?
February 5th, 1948.
All right. And let's see, my name is Carlton Cartwright. I'm the Executive Director for the Children's Coalition Incorporated. We're here this morning on May the 9th, 2015. Doing the interview, it's just Dennis and myself. Okay, and Dennis, what branch of the service did you serve in, and what war? What was your rank, and where did you serve?
Okay, I was in the United States Army from 17 July 67 to 2 May 69. And of course, that was the height of the Vietnam conflict. So after basic and AIT, I was promptly shipped over to South Vietnam for service there.
Okay. Were you drafted or were you enlisted?
Well, I actually volunteered to be drafted after checking with the various recruiters in my area, and found at the time my choices, no matter what the branch was a combat arm of some sort, mostly artillery, infantry, or engineers. So I picked the type of enlistment that would give me the shortest period of active duty, which was to volunteer to be drafted into the Army, which gave me a 2-year commitment.
Okay. Okay. So.
So I volunteered to be drafted.
Okay. Why did you pick that branch of the service?
Well,
could you have, gone into another branch or what?
Well, to get the 2-year bit, you had to be drafted, and you were drafted into the Army.
Okay.
Although you could have been assigned to the Marine Corps, but I was not.
Okay. All right. Where were you living at the time?
St. Petersburg, Florida.
Gotcha. And you recall your first days of service? What was that like, and where did you go into boot camp?
Well, I have a fairly clear memory of virtually all of it. And I went into the Army via the reception station and induction station in Jacksonville. And that was the beginning of my military career. You're actually sworn in at that point. And at the reception station, I was admitted to officer candidate school. The nature of the school was not yet to be decided, but I was told there that they were going to make an officer out of me. I later followed my father's advice and declined a commission.
Okay, and why did he advise you to do that? I'm just curious.
Well, Dad was in the 8th Army Air Corps as a radio and radar technician. He made it up to, I think, East 6, and served north of London with the 8th Army Air Corps during World War II. And he said, if you take a commission, they've got you for life. And I was not interested in a lifetime career in the Army. I was interested in, serving the nation in a military role because my father did, all my uncles did, so that was the thing. Besides the fact that everybody was getting drafted anyway, and I already had 2 of my friends from high school off to Vietnam. One came back severely wounded and medically disabled. He was a Marine. So, they called to duty, but I didn't want to make a career out of it.
Okay. Do you remember your instructors in basic training?
Oh yeah, we had a excellent DI in basic. I forget his name, but I remember him quite well. Skinny guy, not too tall, but very dedicated to make sure that we were well qualified and prepared for what we knew we were going. We all knew we were going to combat. So, yes, and then that was in Sandhill, Fort Benning. I made E2 in basic. I was the top dog in the training company in terms of not only academic success, but also at the top in physical training. And I also shot expert, so they gave me an E2 rank in basic. Then I was shipped off. I did not actually decline my commission until I got through AIT at Fort Sill
Mhm.
for artillery AIT, where they taught us how to do the ballistic calculations and the trigonometry to put rounds on target, and they also taught us how to be a forward observer and to adjust the rounds on target.
Mhm.
And from there, we went over to Vietnam.
Okay. Something else that I wanted to ask you. Anyway, oh, while you were in Vietnam, were you ever a prisoner of war?
No, but I did help take over and disassemble a field POW camp that we came across when I was doing my FO routine.
Okay, well, tell me about your experiences in Vietnam.
Well, as I said, we came straight out of AIT, 30 days leave, then off to Vietnam. At the end of my advanced individual training at Fort Sill, which was OCS preparatory, that's when I declined the commission. I was then offered sergeant school. I declined that. In basic, I was also offered an option of going to helicopter pilot school. Didn't want to get shot down, so I declined that. And ended up as an artillery forward observer and fire direction control specialist. And I arrived in country on the 20th of December 1967, local time, landing at Cam Ranh Bay, to the reception station there where you're processed in country. Basically just wait around until you get your orders to your field unit. And I think it took about 4 days for those to come through, and I was shipped up to Chu Lai, assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 82nd Artillery, 196th Light Infantry, Americal Division, with the headquarters of which was in Chu Lai, a large base there, major airport for military jets, and the Marines had F-4s based there, and Air Force, a lot of flying going on there, as well as infantry and associated support personnel in our artillery group. But our field operations were then situated up in the Quezon Valley area, which was west of the provincial capital of Tam Kee, out near, getting on towards the Laotian border.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our primary area of operations, on Hill 445 actually. But being assigned to the 196th Light Infantry, that was the reactionary force for the Americal Division, so we did a lot of moving around.
Okay.
We went to just about every fight in I Corps during the time I was there, including getting called up. We went through way after that battle finished, but we were on a road convoy, the only road transport I did the entire time. We went through Way and saw the aftermath of that particular fight on our way up to Camp Evans, where we were assigned to perimeter security for the camp during the 1968 Ashaw Valley fight. And at that time I was still being a forward observer. I was actually the radio telephone operator for I was the lowest ranking guy, which is why you carry the radio. So I was out with the infantry at that time. But you go through the in-country training. We had some necessary in-country training in Chu Lai by SF Special Forces. Basically, how not to get bit by bamboo pit vipers, and what sort of things to watch out for in the field that were presented threats to us, such as snakes and spiders and things like that, as well as how to deal with the type of opposition that we'd be engaging up there, which was primarily the 2nd NVA Division. We did not have VC to speak of in the area. It was North Vietnamese regular army, fully equipped guys. The only thing they didn't have were airplanes and tanks, but they had everything else.
Right. Were there a lot of casualties in your unit?
In my artillery battery, and no, we didn't sustain a lot of injuries because we were, The artillery battery, although we were a forward fire support base, way out in the middle of nowhere, and the only way to get there is with a helicopter, we always had a company of infantry, well, almost always, a company of infantry surrounding us and providing perimeter security. So what we had to deal with mostly was mortars and rockets, and we had to deal with quite a few of those. Fortunately, we sustained just a few casualties, shrapnel wounds to some of the gun bunnies there. We had some interesting narrow escapes. I remember one night when we were under attack, the cook's hooch sustained a hit, and his sleeping cot was completely shredded by shrapnel. Fortunately, he was not in it at the time. So things like that happened, but in the battery itself, not too many casualties. I think maybe 4 or 5 guys got dinged by shrapnel. The infantry, however, was a different story. During the 68 Tet, we were told, we didn't get official reports, but we were told we sustained nearly 100% casualties in the infantry during that. It was about a 10-day encounter. There was a ferocious battle in the Quezon Valley area for those 10 days. We didn't see, it was not dark for over a week. The sun went down and the C-130s with flares went up, and they pretty much kept the entire valley well illuminated most of the night, every night during that fight.
Okay.
So the infantry took quite a heavy hit. Oh, hit by small bits of shrapnel, not to speak of, scratches. The biggest stuff I had to deal with was as a forward observer walking through elephant grass, you get cut up quite a lot by that stuff, so I sustained a lot of inconvenient cuts to exposed areas from elephant grass that, because you're in the field, pretty much always festered up and got infected, and you had to have a medic work you over and that sort of stuff. But those aren't direct combat injuries, they're just incidental.
Okay, well, still part of it. But curious, you said that you did an operation where you took part in dismantling a POW camp?
Yes, while I was, as a part of the fire direction control team, let me explain that for those who don't understand. Our artillery is directed by an observer in the field, the forward observer. They find the target. They send you back grid coordinates. That comes into the Fire Direction Control Center, my specialty, 13 Echo 20. That information then is plotted by a vertical chart operator, a horizontal chart operator, a computer operator, and the chief computer. Those are various positions within the Fire Direction Center, and we all do that role. As we are in the FDC, you start out as a vertical chart operator. You find the grid coordinates, tell you how high it is above sea level.
Okay.
The horizontal chart operator is the next step up. They have a big flat table with a grid map on it, and you plot the target, and you have a central point where your guns are, and you get your range and your direction. That information is then converted into firing information by field artillery directional computer, and then the chief computer, which is where I ended up as a chief of section, computes it with trigonometric slipsticks and tables, and you compute your firing data, and once you're satisfied that you have accurate firing data, then the chief computer, which I was for about half my tour, then sends the commands to the gun battery as to what to be firing and where to point and when to shoot. So that's FDC, Fire Direction Center, and the forward observer out there is at the other end of the rounds, and they tell you how good you're doing and adjust the aim for you so that you get the rounds on target.
How long was your tour in Vietnam?
11 months and 21 days. I had a 1-week drop to come back to the States, which was just a matter of the scheduling. You went home near the end of your 12 months at the Army's discretion as to the exact date of your departure. So.
Did you go on leave while you were over there?
Oh yeah, we got 1 R&R, and I went to Taipei and had a wonderful time for 5 days playing civilian.
Is that in Vietnam, Taipei?
No, Taipei, Taiwan.
Taiwan, okay.
It was the capital of Taiwan. And Chiang Kai-shek was still in charge there. He was the brother-in-law of Mao Zedong.
Mm-hmm.
Mao Zedong, of course, was still in charge of China. And Chiang Kai-shek lived in a big palatial castle kind of thingy in Taipei with big walls with broken glass embedded in the top of the concrete and guys with grease guns walking around perimeter security.
Mm-hmm.
So, but otherwise, it was a really nice town. Had a lot of fun.
Tell me about your awards and medals, citations.
Well, because I was in Vietnam, I received the Army's Vietnam Service Medal and the Army Campaign Ribbon, and 2 campaign stars. And I'm not real sure which campaigns I was in. I know we were in Rolling Thunder, which was a big campaign, but we were in some other campaign that, well, they never told us the name.
Okay.
So I have 2 campaign stars on my Vietnam medals. I also shot expert in basic. That was helpful. I think I mentioned that.
Right.
Got me a 3-day pass out of basic training. That was the incentive. If you shot expert, you got a 3-day pass. And I'd already been a Boy Scout and learned how to shoot. My dad had taught me how to shoot, so that wasn't too difficult. And I received the Army Commendation Medal. And then I understand later Congress authorized, or somebody did, the Combat Action Badge for people in combat who weren't infantry. I was out with the infantry for over 5 weeks, many firefights. I literally adjusted fire within 25 meters of my personal position because the combat was that tight.
Right.
But since I was an artilleryman, we weren't entitled to receive the Combat Infantry Badge, and we groused rather loudly about that, and apparently that complaint was heard, and now we're authorized the Combat Action Badge. But typical military, that came later, so they never actually sent it to me.
Okay.
I understand I'm entitled to it,
Okay.
which seems fair enough.
So after Vietnam, where did you go after that?
Well, I still had time left on my 2-year commitment.
Right.
So I was initially assigned to go back to Fort Sill to be an instructor. So as I'm leaving Vietnam, I'm assigned to be an instructor at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I took my AIT. So I was familiar with the place. I liked the town. It was a nice place. But by the time I landed at Seattle, where we came back, they changed my orders. There was some big something going on. So I ended up at a headquarters battery at Fort Hood, Texas, where I pulled 5 months of garrison duty there before receiving an early out to go to college.
Oh.
So I got let me see, my 2-year commitment would have been up on 18 July 69, but I actually got out on 2 May 69 to return to college.
Okay. Did you use your GI Bill for
college? Oh yeah, I
Right.
used every bit of it.
Okay.
I used it to, when I'd had 1 semester of college before I volunteered, and so I already had spent essentially 2 years away from college, so I was behind the curve, so to speak.
Right.
So I got back into college and just went straight through first St. Petersburg Junior College, where I worked at my father's radio and TV shop.
Okay.
Then I finished that, had met a gal, got married to her. That's an interesting story. Her father was an OSS lieutenant in World War II. He had grown up in France, moved to the States following his older brother, got here in the late 30s, became a citizen. Pearl Harbor came along, he went down and volunteered, and because he spoke 6 European languages and was a native Frenchman,
Right.
Bill Donnelly's network picked him up as he came in for active duty and promptly sent him into the OSS, made him an officer, and put him behind the lines in France. But here's the connection. They pulled him out of France and sent him into Vietnam with a medical team that he commanded to save the life of Ho Chi Minh. So my father-in-law saved Ho Chi Minh's life in World War II.
Wow.
And in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh soldiers were our enemies. So in the book OSS, you'll see my father-in-law, called the French lieutenant, sitting on a log with General Giap, Ho Chi Minh, a team of medics, and Ho Chi and Giap's assistants.
Gotcha.
Weird.
Yes. Very. Okay.
Strange connections.
How did you stay in touch with your family while you were in Vietnam?
Well, mostly by way of letters, and I technically I had two moms, so to speak. My mother, and then our neighborhood mom, who was the mother of two of the guys that I grew up with. Okay. And so we were all close knit and exchanged letters. And I actually got to call home once. We had a Mars station on the hill for a little while. That was a military radio system that allowed us satellite communications back to the States. Mm-hmm. Very high tech back in '68. So I actually called home once from my fire direction control bunker on the front one time, which I thought that was rather interesting.
Extraordinary, huh?
But usually just letters.
What was the food like?
Army food? That's a silly question.
Well, just,
Well, while I'm with the I'm with the battery.
Yeah.
We had 3 hots a day.
Okay.
Pretty much, unless the kitchen got blown up.
Right.
Out with the infantry, I did 5 weeks as a forward observer. A forward observer team is a lieutenant, a sergeant, and then a specialist. And I was the lowest ranking fellow at that time, so I got to carry the radio. Mm-hmm. But we all did adjusting fire depending upon the circumstances at the moment. Sometimes I was the guy doing the adjusting fire because my lieutenant was pinned down and I was better positioned to do the adjusting than was he. And frequently it was the lieutenant that was actually doing the adjusting fire, but not infrequently it was either the sergeant or me, depending upon the circumstances. And we would also be sent out with squads and split up the team so that we could triple our effectiveness. So each one of us was capable and did actually adjust fire with the artillery. But that's how that worked.
Right. Okay. Did you have enough supplies?
Well, we were talking about food. In the field, we got sea rats.
Right.
Which they're okay, but there's some of it you don't eat.
Right.
Like the ham and lima beans, we never eat that. We would have fun with that back at the forward fire support base. We would throw the ham and lima beans into the trash fire and watch them explode.
Oh Lord!
It's sort of like a hand grenade. I can remember one time when I was out in my FO trick.
Right.
We just captured. It was lightly defended. I think there were 1 or 2 rear guard left with it, but it was a major supply station for the NVA during the Tet Offensive. We captured a lot of weapons, and that day I happened to get a care package from home that had a 2-pound can of Dinty Moore chicken and dumplings. And boy, was that good.
Okay.
That was some good eats. But otherwise, sea rations, 2 a day.
Yeah. Tell me about your level of stress and pressure when you were in the combat zone.
Well, you'd go for several days where nothing's happening, so you're just bored. And back in the now I'm going to restrict my comments to the time I was on the hill.
Right.
Now, we were on many hills, and one of them was called LZ Suicide for obvious reasons. We were bait, and we were trying to dissuade the 2nd NVA Division from attacking Tam Key by sticking this little shiny thing out so far out that it couldn't get fire support from any other artillery. Fortunately for us, the NVA went around us. That was a little bit nail-biter time, but they went around us and actually did hit Tam Key. They didn't do too well. The battery there was fully equipped with beehive rounds, and the NVA suffered a lot of casualties. Mm-hmm. So unless you're actually in combat, it's you're sitting around playing pinochle or reading magazines, cleaning up the area, trying to make your accommodations more commodious, more comfortable, things like that. When I was out with that's low stress. When I was out with the infantry for the 5 weeks I was there, you're on the whole time. I remember the first night I slept out there. It was sprinkling. We were on a little knoll, a little rise above the rice paddies, and scattered around us were body parts left over from the Tet Offensive. Literally. I mean, they're all dried and blackened, but there's a piece of a leg over there, an arm over there, a torso over there.
Right.
So that was the reminder of what was going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So that was not too friendly, and so I went to sleep that night wondering whether I'd wake up. But you get over that after a few days, and then it becomes routine because that's the normal thing. So although you're alert at all times and you're prepared for anything at every moment, which is a high level of stress, it feels more normal. So from anywhere from laid back to where's the next round going to come from? And of course, during the actual combat operations, you're too busy to be scared. You're just working. The scared part comes afterwards, and you look around and say, "How the heck did I survive that?"
What'd you guys do to entertain yourselves?
Pinochle.
Oh,
That was about it.
Right.
You know, there's not a whole lot. We played. Oh, here's what we do to entertain ourselves. The NVA was known to be monitoring our radio frequencies, and so we get music over there. Guys would get stuff sent to them from home. So we had this copy of Arthur Brown's Fire, and the opening line is, "I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you fire," and he does it in a real theatrical way. So when we're getting ready to fire the battery at targets that we know are live targets,
right?
and we're in a combat situation,
Yeah.
we would put that on, I forget, what did we have back then? Some sort of tape player. We'd cue it up, and I would cue our mic both to the FO, which is the radio link, and the landline to the gun battery,
Yeah.
and start Arthur Brown's lead in. And I would use that to give the battery the command to fire. Well, they knew what was coming because the end line is fire, which is what we tell them to do. So we're telling the NVA and the gun battery, "Here it comes." That was sort of entertaining.
Okay.
Anything for a laugh.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's not as if the NBA didn't know it, because here we are sitting on top of a mountain and you can see the gun battery, and when an artillery battery goes off, everybody knows it.
Gotcha.
Kind of hard to miss.
What are the various places that you traveled while you were in the service?
Well, just to Vietnam, and
Okay.
as I said, I was all around I Corps from Chu Lai. As far north as we got was Camp Evans, and that again was during the 68 A Shaw fight. I think it's appropriate here to tell you what I first saw. We took this road convoy in Deuce and a Half, up Highway 1, from Tam Key straight into Camp Evans, which was on Highway 1,
Right.
up in northern I Corps, not too close to the DMZ, but pretty far up in the northern area. And as we drive into the base, on the right side, I see more than a football field area full of blown up helicopters of all sorts. On the left side are two Deuce and a Halves. Well, I'll wait while you play with the camera.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
We drive in and we see the helicopter graveyard on the right.
Right.
On the left, two Deuce and a Halves, full to the top with full body bags. And I look over to the mountains that are the border of the A Shaw Valley to our west, and here comes a sky crane with a Chinook slung under it, and under that a slick. So it's got two helicopters being dragged out of the valley and to be brought over to the graveyard. So that was a clue that we were in a big fight. Fortunately, it was on the other side of those mountains. What we had to deal with there at Evans was rocket attacks. And the NVA had the high ground there, so the 122 rockets could range us, and they frequently did. And one night after my R&R, one of them found a 10,000 gallon JP jet fuel storage tank about 100 meters from me. I was sleeping on top of the FDC bunker that night. It was a nice night. I'm a field soldier, so I just threw my air mattress up on that and laid out and had a nice sleep until that 10,000 gallon tank exploded. That'll wake you up right away. It was really hot.
Were there any casualties?
I don't know for sure, but certainly 10,000 gallons of jet fuel went up. I hope nobody got hurt in that particular one, but we would sustain casualties around. Evans was a big base. It was capable of landing 130s. I remember landing in it coming back from R&R, and like the LZ suicide we were set at once, as I mentioned earlier, at that point there are no roads at LZ suicides, it's helicopters. And because of the intensity of the fighting going around the area, the helicopters would come in at 2,500 feet plus, right over us, and then just corkscrew down onto the pad, let out what they needed to let out, take on whatever they needed to take on, and then go straight back up. Because you didn't want to fly away from our perimeter too far unless you were above rifle fire. At Evans, the C-130s were doing essentially the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I can remember laying at literally the back end of C-130 with my head resting on my helmet, looking up to the flight deck, which is like 5 feet above the cargo deck, and I could see out through the windshield of the aircraft, looking down, and all I could see was the threshold of the runway. So we were literally pointed down at the runway. The mountains were behind us over here, so the pilots just didn't want to get too close to those mountains, so they'd come in high and dive at the runway.
Right.
That was interesting. Just reminded you what you were there for.
Hair raising. I got you.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Entertainment.
As long as you didn't lose your sense of humor.
Well, I mean, you could go crazy pretty quickly if you didn't keep your wits about you.
Right. What did you think of officers or your fellow soldiers?
I had great officers. Captain Bartholomew was our battery commander. He was a great guy. And our Field 6. Now, I don't think I ever learned his name. We used military code for everything out there.
Okay.
So the company commander was the 6th. The 1st platoon lieutenant was 1-6, 2nd platoon was 2-6, and like that.
Right.
And guys came and went a lot because, first of all, we were on a rotation period with 1 year's active over there, so people were coming and going fairly frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And I was literally told in my in-country training that you're going to see a lot of changes in terms of personnel, so you probably won't be able to get too close to people. But fortunately, I became good friends with all the fire direction control people for the months I was there, and they were a crazy bunch, and we had fun. Steve Mason was my FO out in the field. He was a lieutenant. He's a nutty guy. Had fun with him. He was a career officer. And my infantry 6 in the field was very strict on engaging the enemy. We literally were not allowed to fire weapons on any target unless they were confirmed NVA soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we went through villages that we had taken fire from, that we knew were being used by the NVA as supply stations. The people really didn't have much choice in the matter. They were just caught between a rock and a hard place. But we were under strict orders to be civil to all the civilians.
Yeah.
To make sure that we made friends, not enemies. And we, again, were not firing weapons indiscriminately at anybody. If we locked and loaded, it was because it was an NVA regular, clearly identified.
What is NVA? North Vietnamese Army?
North Vietnamese Army. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
So it's a very professional group, and we later, Lieutenant Calley's event down south of us happened during this period of time, and we just couldn't understand how that could possibly happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a failure of command.
It's at My Lai, right?
Yeah, the My Lai massacre. It's civilian again.
What was the date again when you separated?
2 May 1969.
Gotcha.
I received my early out to go back to college.
Oh, okay. And where did you go to college?
I returned to re-enter St. Petersburg Junior College, where I was. I returned home with my folks. I'd turned 21 in Texas. I turned 20 in combat. So I was the average age of a soldier over there, 19, hence the song 19 of that era. And
Alice Cooper.
I forget who did it, but it was 19 was the title of the song, and it was about Vietnam, and that was the average age of the troops over there. So I came back, was back in college, in a hurry to get through because I was a little bit older than the usual college freshman.
Right.
And so I went straight through, met a gal during my second year, Madeleine, her dad being the Louis Noni, the lieutenant for the OSS.
Okay.
And she came down on vacation in 1969 with another gal, met her up, started dating, and we ultimately ended up marrying the next year before I went off to upper division school at the University of West Florida, which is in Pensacola.
Right.
Where I went through the political science major course there, became active at that school in the school council, became a school senator, helped establish the student judiciary, which was in charge of enforcing the student code, was made an ad hoc member of the faculty of the School of Education for purposes of the accreditation study, because that school was just being first accredited as a university. So basically I became a flunky of the professors and had to do survey research of graduated students to see how they were doing, which was fun work. So I learned how to do survey research,
Right.
Which was part of political science at the time, and becoming more and more important in determining how politics was run. And I finished there and went straight into law school at the Florida State University College of Law, and my GI Bill lasted to my senior year.
Okay.
So on 36 months worth of GI Bill, I made it from freshman undergraduate to junior law student.
Congratulations.
And then I had to take out a loan to finish my senior year.
So what did you do after you graduated?
Well, I was fortunate enough to do an internship at the Public Defender's Office in Tallahassee, where I was permitted to try 2 jury trials and argue 2 cases in the First District Court of Appeals. So I was actually a practicing lawyer. And actually, although my full membership in the Florida Bar started in 1975, my membership in the Florida Bar started as a law student member in the law student division of the Florida Bar in January 1974. So I'd already had a year's worth of legal experience, an internship at the Public Defender's Office. They kept me on after my internship, hired me to do briefs on non-capital murder appeals. So with that experience in December of 74, when I actually got my Juris Doctorate, fortunately with honors, that was a help. I got 2 job offers and took the one here in Sarasota and became an assistant public defender here for 2.5 years. And then I went into private practice and have been in private practice ever since.
Okay.
Until recently, which I'm now retiring. Hallelujah.
Okay. Did you make any close friends? And did you continue the relationships, and for how long?
Well, I made friends, but they did not continue post active duty.
Mm-hmm.
There's one fellow I'd like to look up sometime, Germán Dominguez Cruz Segundo de Ponce y Nueva York,
Okay.
and her name is Herman Cruz. He grew up in Ponce, Puerto Rico, but his family moved to New York City, and his father owned a grocery store in New York City. And we started palling around at Fort Hood, and became pretty good buddies there. And he actually got me into the medics, so I transferred out of the FDC and became a medic. I'd already had substantial medical training in high school, and enough that I immediately qualified to be a first aid medic there in garrison duty, which was handy because then I didn't have to pull KP. There's always a reason.
There you go.
There's always a reason. And I've lost track of Herman, but one of these maybe I'll be able to find him.
Okay. So, well, did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Well, it taught me what war is.
Mm-hmm.
And then in college, my minor is in American history, my major is in political science, so I learned a lot about politics and the history of politics, which is a lot of the history of war.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the personal experience of what war really is, and then I received the academic training of how wars occur. And then while I'm in college, it's learned that the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, the incident, was pretty much didn't really happen. Certainly not the way it was portrayed. And the reason why we ended up in Vietnam started back at the end of World War II with the French wanting to retake their colony and threatening the Marshall Plan if we didn't help the French retake Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So, I learned that not all wars are necessary. Some are just political. And I then became active with the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. They didn't have an official branch at the university I was at. We were in a Navy town, and that one went over too well.
Right.
But philosophically, I became involved with, and as a student activist at the time, we did what we could to help end that particular war. And that idea has persisted ever since. And to this day, it occupies a significant portion of my activities as a founder of the Democratic Veterans Caucus of Florida, but more importantly, the Florida Veterans for Common Sense, which was founded by 3 soldiers, me and 2 Air Force guys. One was a POW, because we had heard the line before of how the enemy is about to attack and knew that it was probably nonsense, and tried to educate the population that the storyline that they were getting out of Washington was bogus, and there was no real need to fight Saddam Hussein because Osama bin Laden was not in Iraq. Osama bin Laden was over in Afghanistan. So that organization commenced for the sole purpose of keeping us out of Iraq and going after where the bad guy really was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you see how successful we were in that endeavor, and it took a new president to actually go get Osama bin Laden.
Overall, how did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, combat makes you enjoy being alive because you see a lot of death. You see a lot of young people dying. So you try to live life to the fullest and do what you can to see to it that other people don't suffer the consequences of an unnecessary war. Wars are a bad thing to start with, and if you don't need to fight them, don't. And that's the message that George Washington gave us. And that's the message that other founding fathers gave us. So that's the message we try to tell our brothers and sisters. Sometimes wars are necessary, but don't fight them unless you have to. And it's a simple message, and it seems like common sense. You know, they're very expensive, these wars, in many ways.
Yeah.
Not just money. And one thing that most people don't understand is wars. You can take the soldier out of the war, but it's hard to take the war out of the soldier.
Mm.
And right now I have friends who are in their 70s who are still dealing with the consequences of their service.
Right.
So war has a very long tail to it, and it echoes down the generations. So try not to get into fights, but if you have to get into a fight, be ready for it.
Right.
So I was a Boy Scout. We always need to be prepared. And as Lieutenant Louis Noni was wont to say on occasion, hope for the best, plan for the worst, take what comes. And if you're ready, you can handle it. So that's my takeaway from being a soldier.
Do you feel like there's anything we haven't covered in the interview?
Well, we've left out a lot of the combat fights, but I don't know that that's primetime entertainment. But I will say this, the movie Platoon
Yeah.
Was about the 196th. And of the various combat films that I've seen,
Right.
that one I thought was the closest to being actually in combat. And then the nighttime fight in Apocalypse Now, the night battle,
Right.
was very realistic and harkened back to some night fights I was in.
Mm.
So if a non-soldier wants to know what it's like, I would suggest watch those two without actually hearing the zing of the bullets flying past you. Or the shrapnel. The shrapnel makes a completely different sound. It's scarier than bullets.
Right.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for your interview and thank you for your service.
You're welcome.